Okay, good afternoon everyone. It's nice to see you all. It's rare that we all get to assemble as a team. I hope you are well caffeinated for another PD day. Wade and I are back for another presentation, and today we are doing a deep dive into the topic of floor transfers. Now, ever since we started running the falls prevention programs, we've identified that floor transfers is such a crucial yet underutilized skill within the realm of falls prevention. I think as a team and as a profession, we spend a lot of time and emphasis on standing balance, which is important, but rarely ever talk about what happens when the fall inevitably occurs. So Wayne and I strongly believe that practicing and teaching floor transfers regularly, not only dramatically improves your client's independence, but it also helps them feel a lot more confident in themselves. And I think that as a profession, if we want clients to get more exercise and get more movement, then we need them to feel that confidence in going out in the community to access exercise classes and also to be more active in general. So the goal of today's session is for every one of you to leave here feeling like you have a tangible skill set that you can apply with your clients tomorrow if you wanted to. Okay, we've designed this session to be very much like a seminar where we're going to be getting out and doing stuff so that we can learn by application and not just by listening. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, let's begin. So, can everyone see the slides here? I'm not blocking anyone? Cool. So what are floor transfers? Put simply, it is the ability to move independently between different positions on the floor and eventually to stand up. And this can happen with or without a sturdy object or some furniture. Now, the first thing we're going to do is actually establish that as a team, collectively as MSWA Physio, where we're at in terms of applying floor transfers in our sessions. As promised, we're going to jump very quickly into our very first activity, which is a live survey using 2023 cutting-edge presentation technology. All right, Wayne, take it away.
All right. So I'll get everyone to take out your phones. All right, so there are a few key points that we want to emphasize regarding floor transfers. The first one is that floor transfers are heavily underutilized. Now, we can spend time pre-planning our sessions with this ability wheel in mind. And even though that I do agree that this ability wheel gives us a very much a well-rounded or a holistic view towards our clients' impairments, it simply still doesn't tell us what our clients can do after a fall. Right? Now, yes, the presumed answer would be for that fallen individual to be hoisted up, should they have a hoist, or should the carer or themselves call the ambulance as well. But does this promote independence and instill confidence? No, not really. So this is where our floor transfer education and skills training comes in. The next point is that it adds variety to our sessions. Now, I'm sure when we're all prescribing exercise or going through the exercise program, is that we typically or commonly do exercises, on the multi-gym, on the reformer, or perhaps standing tasks, standing exercises in the parallel bars. And all this is great, but as you can see from the results of the two previous polls, is that floor transfers doesn't really appear to have a place in our exercise prescription. And the last one here is clients are thankful and empowered. Now, Fong and I have run numerous falls programs throughout last year, and we have mutually agreed that the floor transfer station is definitely the most challenging, yet also the most rewarding as well. And clients tend to express their gratitude, and in knowing that they've found sort of a newfound independence, knowing that they can lower themselves on the floor and rise back up. And in turn, that is very rewarding for us as physiotherapists as well. So given these 3 points, I'm sure that we can all collectively agree that floor transfers, for how impactful it is, there is not enough emphasis on it in falls management and rehabilitation. All right? And we believe that it essentially comes down to 2 main reasons. So why are we not doing floor transfers? The first point is that it can be quite difficult broaching the subject or approaching the topic of falls and floor transfers with your clients, especially if that said client has had multiple falls in their recent history. So we know if we initiate this conversation, we are likely going to be met with resistance as well. And so simply we just don't engage in it at all. The next point is that we lack a systematic method to safely and confidently assess floor transfers. So some common questions you may ask yourself is, how and where do I get started? Or how do I progress my client from there? And ultimately this leads to two things. We as physiotherapists tend to become very hesitant, or we tend to refrain or avoid the subject of floor transfers altogether. And of course, unrealized gains. Without the tool of floor transfers in our clinical toolbox, we are essentially leaving lots of value on the table. Alright, so in the next part of the presentation, we're going to be addressing these 2 points exactly and equipping you with the necessary skills as well.
So, moving on, skill number 1, initiating and then navigating that difficult conversation with your client about floor transfers. Now, the way we're going to do this is via a role play, which everyone loves. So we're going to do this in pairs, so the first thing I want everyone to do is find yourselves a partner. Okay, so if you are a massage therapist, make sure you are partnered with a non-massage therapist. Can everyone find a partner now?
Where should we see you?
Yeah, we should serve probably.
I'm a physiotherapist student.
Okay, so one of you is going to role play a therapist and the other is going to role play a client.
I'm fine.
Okay, so here's your scenario. Does everyone have a partner? Cool. Here's your scenario. Your client is either Brandon or Barbara. They are 68 years of age, they have MS, and they've been coming to physio to see you for 1 year. In terms of impairments, there is no specific weakness or motor loss. There is just generalized weakness, and what you think most of it is from sedentary lifestyle. They are still fully ambulant with a four-wheel walker, although they are starting to depend on it to a mild to moderate degree, and there is mild nagging back and knee pain. Okay, so that's the profile of your client. Now here's the scenario. The client walks in during one of your physio sessions and tells you that they had a fall last week in the bathroom. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get off the floor and resulted in a long lie of 2 hours. Their partner came home 2 hours later and found them on the floor, and despite physical assistance, couldn't get off the floor again, and finally had to result in calling an ambulance to help. So your scenario begins with the client telling you about this, and then we go live. Okay? Does anyone have any questions? No? Ready? Off you go. Right? So sorry. I forgot to add in a crucial part. As therapy, I haven't given you the mission. As the therapist, your goal is to use this as an opportunity to try to initiate the conversation about floor transfer. So you're trying to convince them to practice floor transfers. And here's the fun part. As the client, I want you to put yourself in this person's shoes, both physically and emotionally. You just had a fall last week. And come up with reasonable objections of why you can't practice floor transfers. And then as a therapist, you have to try to navigate around that using your conversational and persuasion skills. Okay, that is your mission. Alright, ready? And off you go. Gonna bring it back. Okay. I hope that was a bit of fun. It looked like everyone was very engaged, which is good. We're going to do a quick sharing now so that we can all learn from each other's role plays, okay? So, I'd like to hear from someone. What were some of the objections from the client, and how did the therapist address them? Can I hear from a volunteer? Margot was pretty confident.
You go, what was your objection?
I was the client, so my objection was that I was really embarrassed to try and do any falls practice in front of other clients that were here. And then I was also really nervous about trying to do that at home if my partner wasn't there.
Right.
He happened to be out.
Yeah. And what was the therapist's response?
So we're very lucky here because we have a little bit of a private room up there that I could take the client to just do the practice without anyone watching or less people watching. So take down that embarrassment and that, perception. And she agreed. That was good. And we just said we will make sure that she's not practicing at home just yet until she feels 100% confident that she's able to do it.
Yeah. So like a psychological, emotional thing of embarrassment
Support,
and being self-conscious and also worried about, what if I get stuck practicing this at home? Yeah. Did anyone else have any different? I'd like to hear from the crowd. Please share.
What was your objection?
Yeah, my objection was if I'm on the floor, I'm happy to be on the floor, but coming back up, nobody would be able to help me. But my balance is what I have fear about. So that's what I objected with.
Yeah, and the therapist?
Given we are in a controlled environment here, we have the equipment available to help if you can't get up off the floor. We can get a hoist, we have staff available.
Yes.
But it's also what we do in the background as well. Our programs focusing on strength, balance, mobility. All of those things together in the background will help assist the floor transfer, because the floor transfer is obviously going to be the hardest thing that you do. And getting yourself comfortable on the floor and being confident in moving through the motions of going
From the floor.
Yeah, from the floor to
the standing will be the learning process. So
Exactly.
I was convinced for that.
Perfect. Yeah, so I like what you said there about giving them assurance that in the worst case scenario, we've got a hoist. So they know in the back of their mind, it's not so bad. Yeah. Cool. Can I hear from one more pair?
My client's objection was how do I get on the floor when I need to have another fall?
Excellent point, Stephanie. Yeah. Yeah, and how did you manage that, Monica? It's a great point. It's a great point.
I just reassure my client that we definitely won't be pushing her.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like a matter of persistence, and I'll be assisting them to get to the floor in a controlled way, and then also be either close to like a bed or the parallel bar somewhere they can hold on to.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Ben.
This is one I've actually had from real clients,
Yeah.
and you could do a really good job, but saying that doing it here at the gym is way easier than doing it at home because they fall down between the bathroom or out between the toilet and the wall or whatnot.
Yeah.
So I said, well, let's emulate that situation.
Right.
there,
Yeah.
and then see what we can introduce into that environment to make it easier for you at that time.
Yeah. So convincing them that what we do here is transferable to the scenario that they will actually need to use the skill.
Absolutely.
Nice. Okay. I am very pleased to hear what you guys have to say because it's all really pertinent points that I'm about to touch on. Okay, so it's good to know that number one, we have a good understanding of client psychology and that we are equipped to deal with that as therapists. All right, so what we have to offer you are not necessarily specific words or sentences to say to the client because we all know that communication is very variable. The tone that you would use for one person is going to be different to the next. So instead, I'm here to offer you three sort of keys to success or three checkboxes that if you can tick off during your conversation, drastically improves the chances that your client practices floor transfers with you. So here goes. Number one, a demonstration. Show them how simple the steps are. Often the fear that the client has of practicing is just the fear of the unknown. They don't know what they're signing up for if they say yes to you. They have no idea. So as a therapist, if you can give a really good physical demonstration, showing them here's step one, here's step two, and here's how we progress, it gives them clarity about the process and it helps them trust you and go on this journey with you. And often it helps dispel a lot of that fear because they know exactly what is expected of them. So give a really good physical demonstration. Number two, acknowledge and empower. Like Wayne mentioned earlier, whenever we bring up the topic of floor transfers or falls prevention, it can bring up a lot of negative experiences and trauma, especially if the client has had a recent fall. So as therapists, we want to acknowledge this directly, but instead of sort of coddling them or enabling them, we want to empower them to confront those negative experiences. So for example, I might say something like, yes, I hear you, I understand that this is very difficult, it's very scary, it's going to take a lot of effort, but it's going to be worth it, and it's not as bad as you think. Through giving a really good physical demonstration, point number one, I can also show them that floor transfers is a safe and painless process with no risk of getting stuck on the floor. So those are sort of Malika and, sorry, what was your name?
Joel.
Joel? Yeah. Joel's points, right? Showing them that, okay, the worst case scenario is I'm going to give you a hand or we can hoist you, and that there is no, I'm not pushing you to do anything you're not comfortable with, right? So giving them that assurance. And lastly, we want to help the client feel success in small wins. Now, what you find is that when you're trying to get your clients to do floor transfers, is that more often than not, they convince themselves that floor transfers is basically impossible for them before even trying. I can't do this, it's impossible. And I think the best way we address that as therapists is to just get them doing something. Anything, the smallest of steps. It can be starting in supine, rolling over into sideline, and that's it. The reason we do this is because for someone who's quite timid, we want them to feel a sense of victory in confronting what can be a very difficult experience. And if they feel that sense of, oh, shit, like I'm doing this, it gives them a sense of hope to come back for more the next time. So maybe you're not achieving a ton in your first session, but it helps them see that they're getting started on the process, and it gives them that sense of achievement. So in summary, give a really good physical demonstration. We want to directly acknowledge any negative feelings and empower them to confront it as opposed to shy away from it. And number three, we want to help them feel success in the small wins. If you can check these three checkboxes, I promise you that you close the sale. All right, you're getting your clients to practice floor transfers with you. The reason I'm so confident in this is because between Wayne and I, we did a tally and we counted that we've gotten at least 40 of our clients practicing floor transfers. So if we can do it, so can you. All right? Does anyone have any questions about this or communication? Cool. We're going to move on now. So let's say you've done a really good job with your initial pitch and the client has agreed to practice floor transfers with you. Skill number two is where do we get started and how do we progress, right? So systematically teaching the skill of floor transfers. Now again, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to present a clinical reasoning problem to you. We're going to break out into groups to try to solve this problem, and then we'll come back, discuss, and I'll show you what we think is the best approach to solve the problem. Okay, ready? The problem we're trying to solve is what I call the central conundrum of floor transfers. In order to practice a complete floor transfer, I need a client to be able to go all the way down to the floor, just like Steffi has indicated, and then build back up with the right techniques. So in other words, if I have my lovely assistant Barbara here, yeah, and I want her to experience a full floor transfer, I want her to know in the back of her head that I can do this. Firstly, I need her to go all the way down into supine on the floor. Yeah, and then I want her to be able to build back up with the right techniques. Now, hopefully, the alarm bells are already ringing in your head, right? For someone like Barbara, getting down to the floor is very difficult. They can't lower down to the floor. That's the first problem we encounter when we're teaching floor transfers. So if Wayne does this again slowly, lowering your body weight safely all the way to the floor is a fairly challenging series of movements that someone like Barbara is unlikely to be able to do, right? So there are two outcomes. Number one, she cannot physically do it, she's freezing. And number two, she does a crash landing on the floor. Either of which we want to avoid, okay? So that's problem number one. Problem number two is if somehow she manages to get there, what if they get stuck? Yeah, there is no guarantee that even with my physical assistance that we can get someone off the floor. So with anyone that you are trying to do floor transfers with, you are faced with this central conundrum. with the two problems here. So the million-dollar question is, how can we manage this risk while still teaching floor transfers regardless of client ability? This is the answer we're trying to solve in our next activity. So I want you guys to split into a larger group. I think groups of 5 are reasonable. Can we please organize ourselves into groups of 5 now? Again, we're going to bring it in, and I'd like to hear from the groups what you guys have. Do we have a brave volunteer? So someone from one of the groups. All right, Ben, go ahead.
So we thought the first important thing was breaking down the task into 2 separate bits. So they're going from standing to kneeling or 4-point position. None of these not doing it.
Yeah.
Being too sore, so that's something we really want to focus on.
Yeah. So you've split it into 3 sections. So one is supine onto a 4-point. Yep. And then another one is the kneeling stuff where they're stepping up the half kneel. And then you've got a third one which is standing to ground.
I've got
Is
a really
that right?
cool program called Floor to Feet. Yeah, separated it down into those tasks. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. That's actually very close to what we have to show you. But again, I want to hear from one more other group. On the edge of the bed? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
And also, really what they say, supine, folding, and get comfortable, moving on the bed first before we get it on the floor.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so from what I hear from the 2 groups, you guys have pretty much hit the nail on the head. Hit the nail on the head. The assessment and treatment process that we are going to outline is very similar to what we've been hearing, but through trial and error, we've sort of condensed it into the most efficient version, okay? So I'm going to show you what we do with our clients that we do floor transfers with, and give you a reason why we do it this way. I'm going to split the process into 2 sections, a plinth section and a floor section. Intuitively, we all know, let's not get them to the floor from the get-go, start on the plinth first. The goal of my plinth section is I want to assess and teach the client to go from supine all the way up into half kneel, and then more importantly, from half kneel back to supine again. Okay, now I achieve a few things when I'm doing this. Number 1, there is no risk of getting stuck, obviously. In a worst case scenario, if the client is getting stuck somewhere, I can get them scooting over the edge of the bed and they can stand up. Number 2, it allows me to check the 3 check boxes that we spoke about earlier, right? When I start on the plinth, I can give them a very specific demonstration about what I want them to do. I can help them see that we start on a soft surface, it's comfortable, there's no risk of getting stuck. And lastly, I can get them started on the process doing something simple. Okay, so that's a big plus. Now, the reason I emphasize the lowering from half kneel down to supine is because earlier we mentioned that problem number 1 of the central conundrum is that the client needs to lower down to the floor into supine. If I do this and I get them competent in the plinth section, it gives me insurance about what is going to happen when I actually get them on the floor. Because I've seen them do it on the plinth, I know that if I get them on the floor, it's not that much different. Okay, so we start on the plinth, go from supine half kneel, and I want to teach them going down from half kneel back to supine. You'd be surprised how difficult going from 4-point and lowering back into supine is. If you've tried this with your client, you know what I'm talking about. Now, if my client gets to here, right, physically, they are only really 1 step away from completing the full floor transfer. All they have to do is push off their legs and their arms, and they are pretty much in standing. However, getting a client standing on a soft plinth, on an elevated surface, pushing on an object that is movable, is a terrible idea. But don't do it. It adds more risk to your process than reduces it. So, if I can't stand up on the plinth, naturally I'm going to get them down on the floor. Now we've heard some really good ideas here that are all valid, right? I've put a standing to a half kneel here, but seated to a half kneel also applies here. If my client is good enough to stand, I'm going to get them weight bearing on the plinth. I like them splitting their feet and teaching them to control themselves to lower all the way down into half kneel. The quality of them lowering down is a really good proxy for whether they can come up. right? If someone can control their weight all the way down to the floor without crash landing, I know that the chances are they can come back to standing. So I do this a couple of times. I make sure I'm confident in their ability and that I don't have to, physically assist them. And if they can get here safely, guess what? We are back to here again. I get them lowering all the way down to the supine, but this time on the floor, and voila, we are on the floor and Barbara is ready to do a full floor transfer. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, so pretty simple process. Start on the plinth, do as much as you can, teach them to go up to half kneel, build down to supine. If they're competent with that, take the leap of faith, go to the floor and lowering down into half kneel. Okay? If you follow this process, your client will not get stuck. You get to see what happens when you actually lower them onto the floor, but without the risk of getting stuck because we're on the plinth. Okay? Follow this process and your client will be safe. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about this? Marga?
Going from half kneel to supine and from short way with the client, like, are you assisting them or?
Okay, so obviously it's a step-by-step process.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the lowering portion specifically?
Just going from half kneel back to supine.
Okay.
Are you assisting them?
Okay.
Or are you just like verbally guiding them?
Yeah, so from my experience, the hardest part about that is, so from half kneel, they can probably step the knees down into 2 point, that's usually fine. They can usually create space and come down into 4 points, so hands and knees on the mat. The hardest part, and I don't know if everyone can see this, but it's actually going from 4 point here and bringing their hips to the floor, because this is a big fall for them, right? Someone like Barbara doesn't have the control. So there are a couple ways to do this. Ideally, I want to use elbow prop, right? So I ask them to drop to an elbow here and start to sort of lower their hips as slowly as they can. If they're really struggling with that, I might give them physical assistance at the pelvis. That's one method. The next method is I get them to do what I call a prone walkout, right? So instead of crashing down to the side, I get them weight bearing on their forearms and walking themselves into prone and then rolling back. Does that make sense? Yeah. So in terms of assistance, that's the only step that usually requires assistance. Everything else is fine.
Well, we find that moving that right leg back can be quite difficult for people, especially if you're in a soft surface, that they just get stuck.
This one? Yeah, absolutely.
Do you give them a little bit of assistance there?
Okay, so the magic cue that you give them is a weight shift away from this right leg, right? So here, they are even on both legs. If I'm trying to step my right leg either up or down, I need to first get them to lean across. So either walking their arms across to achieve that. And if they still can't do that, then I might physically stand beside them so that they can really lean across and clear that leg. Yeah. Anyone else? Sort of rotation movement out to the side. Yeah, and that usually helps them with the foot clearance. Okay, so this is the process that you will use for every single client that you are trying to do floor transfers with. Okay? Now, I know what everyone's thinking. This is the best case scenario. The question is, what if Barbara gets stuck somewhere in the plinth section, or she cannot physically lower from standing the half knee? Wait.
So, like Fong said, say you have identified from using this assessment tool that Barbara tends to struggle going from standing to half kneel, or namely the floor section. There are a few key principles that I want you to be mindful of. So the first one is reducing range of motion. So if I quickly set up here, so I'm using a task-specific exercise, and I want to reduce the range of motion that Barbara has to work through.
By demonstrating stuff, just go over close to where the girl's feet are, because you can see that on the camera. Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yep. Alright, so I identified that Barbara tends to struggle. She becomes quite unsteady to go from standing into half kneel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the range of motion that Barbara can work through. Okay, so I'm observing, I'm providing tactile feedback and making sure that she can lower herself eccentrically down into this reduced range of motion, right? So this is a and how to essentially regress this movement. Say she can confidently and competently perform this a few times. To progress this, I would increase the range of motion that she has to work through by reducing, by taking away one foam mat, and therefore. I'm making sure that Barbara is able to maintain eccentric control throughout the whole movement, because should she not be able to maintain that eccentric control and drop into a fall, this is essentially akin to a fall, right? And we want to, of course, avoid that as well. Perfect. Alright, so finishing off, Fong and I have also created a 27-page PDF guide. It is on Teams called the Clinician's Manual, where it basically outlines a few exercises with its associated progressions, similar to the one that we've just done now, that you can use for your reference. And it also addresses common movement obstacles as well. Right? Additionally, there are some flowcharts too, and I want to just note out that within these flowcharts that there are specific variations that you can use when undergoing floor transfers with your clients for the first time. So like the one that was mentioned previously about platform demonstrators, so from going from supine up into 4-point and vice versa. Using the elbow prop method, or using the elbow prop method here, or using the prone walk back method as well. Some ideas and some alternative methods that you can have in your arsenal. Cool.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up with some takeaway messages. The first one is when you're initiating the conversation with your client, you have the 3 check boxes that you want to tick off, right? Physical demonstration, acknowledge and empower, help them feel success in small steps. Again, you can check these off. The client is practicing floor transfers with you, right? Often in life, the thing that separates you from a really meaningful outcome is a difficult conversation. So get that started, get the client on the program, and they will be thankful to you for it. Start on the plinth, end on the floor, right? This one sentence summarizes the whole process that we just offered to you. Follow it and your clients will be safe. And lastly, the whole point of this session is to equip you with the skills so that you feel confident running floor transfers with your client tomorrow. We want to see everyone doing floor transfers, okay? And if you haven't done this before, I understand that there's a bit of a learning curve. There's a bit of a leap of faith on your part as a therapist, but I promise you that, like Anna said, the first time you see the look of someone's face when they complete a full independent floor transfer, I promise you that it'll all be worth it. All right? Thank you very much.
Yeah. We're going to get into some questions, but before we do that, I just want to say, so all this came about from a conversation we had about 3 PD days ago, mid last year, where we just brought up the fact that this is an area that a lot of us struggle in, both for us teaching it and also for our clients. It's one of the biggest fears. Fong and Wayne said they were going to go away and come up with some ideas. When they came back with a polished product, as you can see here. We've sunk a lot of time and effort into this. Obviously, part of today is getting your feedback and then presenting it. They're keen to hear your ideas and really just try and grow it and keep building upon it. We will do we might do a bit of a roadshow at some point this year. We'll come around to each of your teams so you've got more time to work with these guys directly. But yeah, just a huge thanks to you guys. Well done. Great effort.
Okay.
Where can I subscribe to?
I'm glad you asked. So before we finish, guys, as James and Ben have stated, Wayne and I have created an educational brand called Floor to Feet. We've identified that if there was a knowledge gap in floor transfers within our team, that there's probably one in the whole physiotherapy space in general. So we've created a brand that we want to try to grow, to promote the practice of floor transfers, both to clinicians but also to members of the community, right? So We would really appreciate if you could go on the Facebook, look up Floor 2 Feet with the number 2, give us a follow, and we put out some content. It would be awesome if you could share it so that your peers who are clinicians can also get on the message, and also maybe showing someone, like one of your loved ones, who could get value out of this, right? So to give you a sneak peek, we're going to show you one of the things we put out, sort of an intro video. Wayne and I are going to try not to look, because it makes us cringe watching ourselves.
Down on the floor safely, and eventually stand up. I'm Fong, I'm a physiotherapist from Perth, Western Australia. And in this channel, we're going to show you everything you need to know about getting on and off the floor safely and effectively. We believe if you are willing to put in the effort, you deserve to live your golden years with physical freedom and confidence.
Alright.
Amazing.
The design logo is like very simple.
So yes, give us a follow and share, we would very much appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Where's the sign up? Where's the sign up?